Hey guys, it's been a little while since I've been on. I've had a few questions that I was going to answer before I jump into today's topic for As a Man Thinketh. Number one, a lot of people have been asking, what's going on when we promote kind of, our Twitter account, and we also have another YouTube channel, Meet My Neighbor Productions. So I wanted to quickly explain to you guys why we're doing what we're doing. Number one, as we go into these types of years, what we have found as YouTube creators is that there is a significant amount of shadow banning and censorship based on people's viewpoints. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're breaking any rules or anything like that. They just simply adjust an algorithm and people fall off the face of the earth. The other thing that I've seen happen a lot is improperly placed violations that really end up damaging a channel. So in order to protect everything that we've built, we have been expanding our social media network this year and into as many places as we possibly can. Twitter is one of those places where we feel safe. So if you haven't already, I would suggest you subscribe. We'll be building that up a little more over the next several weeks. And so hopefully we see some of you guys come over there. Meet My Neighbor Productions is a nonprofit entity. As Yanasa TV, we host the productions. You're always going to see them here on Yanasa TV, but we have started a separate channel to protect that entity from, anything that might be construed in the wrong place. And of course, being agricultural productions, that channel faces its own hurdles as well. So that channel is currently just over 400 subscribers. We need to get up to 1,000. So I would highly encourage you guys to subscribe to that. We may also be rolling out some other things to help expand our network and protect us from things that could happen to us as these times progress. Because as you know, censorship is very heavy in our society, and it doesn't always target people properly. A lot of times it just, misreads something, they pick up something you said the wrong way, or it's not categorized properly. They don't have people sitting there that can possibly surf millions of videos being uploaded every single day. And I'm not justifying any type of censorship. I'm just saying it happens and we're preparing for it, especially for this year. That being said, if you're only here, you don't want to listen to As a Man Thinketh, which is a podcast hosted on Yanasa TV, and you're just here for the agricultural content, Meet My Neighbor Productions is the channel that you may want to go to. You won't hear the opinions on what's happening when it comes to agriculture on that channel, unless it's an interview specifically done with Meet My Neighbor Productions. So I wanted to talk today a little bit about what's happening down in Texas, because I've also had people coming to me and I've heard lots of conversations around this. And I think that there's a lot of points that have been purposefully misconstrued, a lot of facts by the big media to make people think that there's, some sort of position here that's even worth negotiating. Just real quick, for those of you who don't know what's going on the Texas border, I don't know how you couldn't, but for those of you who don't know what's going on, basically Governor Abbott has taken control over a small portion of the Texas border, and I think he's clearly trying to expand control over the Texas border. He's calling what we see with these illegal immigrants an invasion into Texas. It's an invasion into the United States. And that, I think, is a matter of perspective. But if you look at what's happening down there, the millions of people who are illegally coming across, the influence campaigns that are going into making those people come across, the facts are there to suggest that this is something much larger than just a simple immigration problem. And so Governor Abbott has decided that since the United States government, who has been tasked with going in and protecting our southern border, and they have not been doing that. There are laws on the books with Congress. There are current laws in place that say, hey, we don't allow illegal immigrants to enter into our country. There's a process that they must go through in order to enter our country. And because the federal government is refusing to implement those laws, to follow through on those laws, we have seen this insurgence of immigrants. And so what Governor Abbott has decided to do is take matters into his own hands. Now, there was an injunction that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, hey, look, while you guys are arguing this has to do with cutting razor wire, while you guys are arguing this case in the lower courts, we're not allowing the injunction. And that was a favor, and that was a ruling that was in favor of Biden. But the mass media kind of spun this to kind of say, hey, look, SCOTUS has ruled in favor of Biden, Abbott needs to back off. But that is not at all what happened. SCOTUS ruled against an injunction from a lower court on an active case that is still in court. Biden didn't win anything at all. That is just an injunction that was ruled in favor of him with SCOTUS. But this is still going on in the 5th District Court, and it will most likely rule in favor of Governor Abbott, from what I have understood about it. Now, until that actually happens, nobody can really say for sure. But there was no big ruling from the Supreme Court that said that Governor Abbott had to leave his position. One of the things that SCOTUS was focusing on was whose job is it to enforce illegal immigration? Whose job is it to enforce the border? Well, that job typically falls on the federal government. And so it's the government who should be enforcing those rules, who should be the lead enforcer of it. And they also were citing different laws of superiority of the federal government over states. But that was just over this one particular injunction. There's a lot of things that have to go through court to be proven before you can fall into some of these other categories. And that's where we are now. This is still an active legal fight in the court system. There was no big ruling. One of the questions that I have is, with these states, what happens when the federal government doesn't follow through? What happens when there are laws on the books, but the executive branch of the government isn't following through with those laws? Governor Abbott recently explained that to everybody. He basically cited the article within the Constitution that gives the state the right at that point in time to step in. Basically, Governor Abbott cited Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, which acknowledges the state's sovereign interest in protecting their borders. This gives the state of Texas, and any other state in our country for that matter, to step in and take matters into their own hands in the event of an emergency or specifically an invasion. And that's where I think, Abbott has to prove that there's an invasion into their state. I don't think that that's hard to do, considering the millions of people that have crossed the border and considering the manipulation that has been going on to bring these immigrants across the border. And that's what a lot of people forget about. They think, oh, these people are looking for asylum, they're looking for safety, they're looking to come to this country for these reasons. But they're forgetting that there have been numerous factual accounts of these people being manipulated to get onto trains and come to our border. And because it's an orchestrated event, somebody is invading our border. And so under this article, he does have the right to protect his border, which is why I don't think Governor Abbott's going to stand down. What you have at the border is actually a mix of National Guards. It's not just Texas. There are other states that have National Guardsmen down there as well with Abbott's. There are state troopers from multiple states. There are Florida state troopers that are down there on the border that are all a part of this Lone Star operation. Okay, which is Governor Abbott's attempt to protect our southern border and protect his state from intrusion. And these other states that have joined this movement are doing it to protect their states, which they all have the right to do. A lot of people have been arguing lately on mass media, on social media, all over the place, that all Biden has to do is federalize the National Guard, and the National Guard will have to follow the president's orders instead of the governor's orders. Under a law passed in 2007, that would be the case. The president would have the right at any time to declare an emergency and take control over the National Guard. But in 2008, that was rectified because all 50 states said this is way too much power that we're giving to the President of the United States. And so when they changed that law from 2007 and 2008, basically they put a clause in there that said, in order for the president to federalize the National Guard for a state of emergency, he must have congressional approval. So it would take an act of Congress, not the president, to federalize Texas National Guard. So this is one of those things where it's a moot point because Congress is never going to vote in favor of federalizing the National Guard based on the circumstances. In fact, a majority of Congress would vote in favor of not federalizing the National Guard. Biden is in a unique spot. The only other thing that he could possibly do is bring the military down there, which he can't do because the only military branch in the United States that can be used domestically is the National Guard. So he could either bring in other states' National Guards. I don't know what he would do, but he would be putting himself in a very bad position if he brought any type of military force or agency force down into Texas for a conflict over illegal people crossing our border. That would be political suicide. Basically, in this situation, I think Texas wins out. I think that what Governor Abbott is doing is ultimately going to win out. I think it's going to win out in courts because he has the constitutional right to defend his state. He has other states involved, and they all have that constitutional right as well. Biden would literally have to break several rules or it would take an act of Congress which isn't going to support him in order to do anything about it other than go through the court system, which is most likely not going to rule in the favor of Biden for all of these events. The only thing, like I said, that SCOTUS has ruled in favor of Biden on with any of this is that injunction. So I think when you hear people talking about this, it's important to get the facts straight. It's important not to pay attention to what the big media is saying. Biden can't possibly federalize the National Guard with a tip of his hat. He has to have an act of Congress. Biden can't just order the National Guard in Texas to, stop protecting their border, saying that it's a federal agency concern, if that federal agency has failed to implement the laws that are already on the books. At this point in time, Governor Abbott can declare an emergency, he can declare an invasion, and he can do everything that he is doing. All of that is 110% legal. At the end of the day, what is happening down on our southern border is a threat to our national sovereignty. There's a lot of things that this entire situation impacts. I did a video interview a while back with Shay Myers, who's an onion farmer out west, and we basically talked about how a lot of farms, a lot of places that we have visited, they're very remote places. They require seasonal workers. There's not a lot of U.S. citizens who want those, part-time seasonal jobs. They pay very well, but they don't want those part-time seasonal jobs. They want to be able to settle down with their families. They want to be able to be in a place for a while. A lot of people are willing to come over from other countries and work those jobs for a season and then leave, or they find another seasonal job. Maybe they're not married, maybe their family life is different and they don't mind sending funds back to them. But when we have a crisis like this on the border, what was happening to Shay is they couldn't get their workers across the border in time to actually harvest their crops, and so they were losing crops. And I think that you see a lot of this red tape building up across the board because Border Patrol is overwhelmed by the amount of immigrants coming across. If it takes you several years to process somebody, how are you supposed to process the people that are supposed to be coming over here, that have the right to come over here, that have a visa, that have gone through the proper system to come over and work the land? So it's a matter of our food sovereignty. It's a matter of our national sovereignty to not allow just millions of people to walk across the border. And there is that manipulation factor to push hordes of people across the border. We've heard all sorts of different reasons for it, to get terrorists across, to get drugs across, to traffic humans across the border. I think all of that's going on. But I think that there is a much deeper meaning behind all of this, and I think it is to wreck American sovereignty. If we just have open flow borders, we are no longer a sovereign entity, a sovereign country. And once you can break down that sovereignty, suddenly it's a lot easier to take control over a country that no longer exists through the global powers that be that would like to have that control. They would like that there is no sovereignty between countries. They would like to have just an overall global guidance system of unelected officials that control every aspect of our life. And I think that at the end of the day has more to do with it, because if you look at the immigration crisis in Europe, if you look at the immigration crisis on our border, it's all the same. It's all being driven by the same purpose. And in every single situation, a lot of those immigrants are being manipulated to head towards the borders. That manipulation is all we need to prove that this is an invasion. Think about it.